This show is brought to you in part by viewers like you who joined a Patreon or become YouTube members. Thank you. And if you could, hit the like button and subscribe if you want more Browns-focused content. All right, so just went through the third day of the Senior Bowl. There's a lot to talk about. I'm going to try to go through every position and just off the top of my head talk about some of the guys who stood out this week, some of the guys who I thought made some money, some of the guys who didn't, some of the guys who left me in a more confused place than maybe I would have started at this whole process. So let's start with the position everybody wants to talk about. Let's talk about quarterback, right? It wasn't a very impressive showing, in my opinion, from any of the teams at the quarterback position. The first team, I believe the national team, there's Dillon Gabriel. Dillon, the size is a problem. He's not as thin as you would think. The hand size for him wasn't an issue either. He has more of a brolic build than I think people assume by watching him on TV. So that's a good thing, right? He's not as small as far as like his build and his frame as like a Bryce Young. He's a little bit bigger than Bryce Young. He is short though. He's 5'10", a solid short 5'10", which does provide its own issues, obviously, at the quarterback position when you're looking for him to find the middle of the field. He throws a nice tight ball. I think he has good enough arm strength to throw footballs in the NFL. I think the issue with him is consistency. Will he be able to consistently find the middle of the field enough to be a starter in the league, right? I think that's the big question about him. This week in Mobile was not very illuminating to that. And this is another thing I'm going to say before I get into any of the quarterbacks. This is a tough a tough situation to evaluate a quarterback in. I think I learned this lesson last year where I saw Penix and I saw Bo Nix, and I thought they looked awful in this setting. And I think the setting might just be a little bit more tough than I think people give it credit for. And because that's the case, I think you can overvalue some of the negative things that you see at practice, and that can make you much lower in the player than you should, right? So it's more about kind of the individual stuff. How does the arm look? How does the build look? How do they look in certain team drills? If they look bad, I'm not going to try to use that to discount them as much as I did in years past, because I think it's just a tough environment for a quarterback to thrive in. That being said, Dillon Gabriel, first team, probably the most impressive guy there. I didn't see much out of Tyler Shaw that made me interested in him in any way. The kid from Canada, he was just kind of there, right? Like I wasn't blown away by him. I also wasn't like so disgusted by him that I would lose interest in him. I'm going to try to adjust the light while the sun is going. So we're doing this kind of live here. But yeah, that was a little bit of an issue there with the first team. The second team had all the quarterbacks, right? Jackson Dart and Jalen Milroe, Seth Hennigan there too. Jackson Dart, he didn't do anything this week that made me notice him. I don't know if that meant that he was bad. I'm going to look over the All-22 for the Senior Bowl once I get back home to my regular studio, and maybe that will change my mind. But yeah, that's my first impression with Jackson Dart. He didn't really make an impression this week, which I think it's its own problem. Because, again, you're talking about a guy that you hope can be a starter in the league. He threw a couple nice balls. I think day 3 for all the quarterbacks on the American team, much better day for these guys. Jalen Milroe made some good throws. Jackson Dart made some good throws. There were some nice moments by Dillon Gabriel in the practices. So I think day 3 was much better. Makes sense. Third day in the offense, better hang of things. It's not really hard to guess why day 3 is much better for these guys, but you got to see some of the stuff that brings them to the table. And Dart does throw a pretty ball. The issue with him is he fumbled so many times this week. Even today, where he had a much better day, he fumbled like 3 times at this practice. And I think that's going to be a consistent issue with Jackson Dart. Like, he doesn't have small hands, but he seems to have small hand quarterback problems, which I don't know what to do with. Jalen Milroe, I think he fumbled a couple times too. He fumbled once today. The issue with Jalen is that he is capable of making a really tight window throw, and he's capable of holding on to the ball, getting sacked, and throwing an interception a lot. There's really no in between. And I think for Jalen Milroe to work in the NFL, he has to be better at that in between. Like, people compare him to Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts, as a passer, cannot hit the tight windows that Jalen Milroe can. And you might look at that and say to yourself, oh, well, Jalen Hurts, he's a much better passer than Jalen Hurts. But I think the nuance to that conversation is this. Yes, Jalen Milroe can throw better tight window throws. If you look at Jalen Milroe's passing only highlights and you compare them to what Jalen Hurts had coming out, Jalen Milroe is going to have better looking highlights than Jalen Hurts. But the issue is that the stuff that's not highlights that gets the offense going, right? The 3rd and short stuff, the 3rd and 5 stuff, the routine, just running the offense stuff, Jalen Hurts is way better, which means Jalen Hurts is going to be able to run an offense that can get ahead of the sticks, where Milroe, he kind of relies on the big plays and being able to make these tight window throws or being able to run with his legs. And I worry about that being a problem with him, right? Because he doesn't have great pocket presence. The down and distance things are going to be issues for him. Like, he needs to sit and develop his basic bag, right? He doesn't have a basic bag to go to. He's kind of like, how do I put this? Milroe is kind of like, he's like a basketball player who has a really nice step back, right? And that step back gives him highlights, but he can't make layups. And that's the problem, right? Jalen Milroe can't make his layups routinely. I think Jalen Hurts did make his layups. He just couldn't do the downfield stuff. Jalen can do the downfield stuff, but he can't do the layups. It's a big problem for Jalen. Because he needs to stay ahead of the sticks for his ability to run to matter the way it needs to matter for him to be the player that he could potentially be with the talent that he has as a runner. Either way, I walked out of the Senior Bowl thinking to myself, all these quarterbacks feel like day 3 picks. So we'll see how Will Howard measures and what he does at the combine and his pro day. I think that matters. I wish he was here because I think that would have been an interesting contrast to see, especially when you have your concerns about Will Howard's just raw arm strength. But that's the big concern with these guys. We'll see where Will Howard lands. But, yeah, I think after Shedeur and Cam Ward, we're talking about day 3 quarterbacks pretty exclusively. Maybe Will Howard can factor into that conversation, but I don't know if anybody should. Somebody might, but I don't know if anybody should jump the gun and get one of these guys in the 2nd and 3rd round. That's just my opinion on it. After watching them in the Senior Bowl, after watching some of their tape, I'm just not overwhelmed enough by what their potential is or what their floor is from any of these quarterbacks to be interested in doing that. Let's switch to running back because, man, I'm going to forget some names. This practice, the Senior Bowl this year, had a lot of running backs. And every flavor of running back that you could imagine. They had the receiving type running back. They had the big bully type running back. They got the hybrids. They got pretty much every type of running back you could want at the Senior Bowl, and that's for the class in total. You got somebody like Ollie Gordon, who big punishing bruiser, right? Patient runner, punishing bruiser, boom, can hit you right in the chest. Then you go to the next practice, and the receiving backs are just amazing, right? Brashad Smith from SMU continued to impress. Trevor Etienne, I think, is probably the biggest riser out of all the running backs at the Senior Bowl. I walk out of this thinking, man, I think he's right up there with the R.J. Harveys of the world, with these guys that we're talking about going in the 3rd, 4th round. Trev's a great route runner, man. He was cooking all these linebackers all 3 days at the Senior Bowl. Very impressed with what he brings to the table. I think Brashad Smith's right there with him as a route runner. If you ask me who the 2 best running back route runners were this week, it's those 2. R.J. Harvey not far behind. He is a little bit less refined than those guys. You watch these 2, Brashad Smith and Trevor Etienne, run routes. They're so smooth. They use so little steps to get to their spot. And when they want to get to their spot, they can slide, right? They're not like doing all the herky-jerky stuff. R.J. Harvey does a lot of the herky-jerky to get open, but his just base athletic ability, his nose and instincts for football are so high that, like, if you just develop him a little bit, he could be a very, very dangerous receiving back. A lot of guys had moments here. A lot of guys were interesting at the running back room. This is the year to get you a running back and maybe get you 2. It's buy one, get one free this year. Go ahead, get you a running back, get you 2. I might want to get 3 because there's just so many good running backs here. Let's go ahead and move on to wide receiver. Now, I didn't, admittedly, I'm going to have to look at the tape to watch a lot of the wide receiver stuff because I wasn't really locked into the DB wide receiver one-on-ones that were happening at the same time. The offensive line stuff was going on. So not as in tune with what was going on over there. Going to have to watch that. Jalen Royals is somebody who stood out. Jaden Higgins had a nice little end zone catch here in one of these practices. He stood out. Other than that, off the top of my head, can't really think of any wide receivers that really jumped out to me in a way that I thought to myself, hey, the Browns need to go out and get this guy. Really wish Restrepo would have showed up. He didn't show up today. He didn't show up for the Senior Bowl this week. Real disappointment he wasn't here. Tight end wise, let's start with the blocking guy, right? Jackson Hawes, he's a blocking tight end. I think he has soft hands for a blocking prospect. Really big guy. Held up well against an edge rusher in one-on-ones. They threw him in a one-on-one in day 2. He held up pretty well there. I think Jackson Hawes, the type of guy that, well, Jackson Hawes, my bad, is the type of guy who could stick onto an NFL roster for a very long time because he just provides all the little stuff, right? He's going to be able to block. He can catch a little bit. Like, he's an ideal tight end 2 in this class. Or not tight end 2 like the number 2 guy in the class, but a tight end 2 prospect. Not somebody you think is going to be your primary tight end, but somebody you could bring in. He can be tight end 2, tight end 3, and I think you feel really good about that. The other guy, Brian Stone from, forgive me if I mispronounce his name, but I think it's Brian Stone from Clemson. Wore 19 at the Senior Bowl. Caught everything that was thrown at him. The one pass he did drop, he almost caught. And it wasn't really a drop. It was a bad ball that he had to adjust to. Tipped it up in the air, almost caught it back on the way down. That kid has good hands. He's been able to get separation all year, all practice. The question with him, can he block? But solid tight end there out of Clemson, and you feel very good about him and his prospects to be an NFL guy. I'm going to do a whole video about the offensive line guys, the defensive line guys. That's going to be a film review, so I'm going to save some of my comments about the trenches for a later video here. DB-wise, I thought Ezra Thomas was fine in this one. Looks like a draft pick. There was a kid, I got to look at the roster. Hopefully I remember to put the name here, but he really popped today. I think he was a late addition, number 10 out of Kansas State. Had an excellent day here. I think he's a safety prospect coming out. Some of the linebackers that were interested, there's Shamar Smith, I believe, out of Florida, wore number 6 here. Thought he had a pretty impressive week. 17 from South Carolina was pretty good too. There was a lot of interesting guys, later round guys in that corner, safety, linebacker conversation that I think are going to be interesting for the Browns probably in day 3. But overall, 3 days at the Senior Bowl, I feel really good about the Browns' ability to really fill a lot of holes. And I think my thought about this draft class after being at the Senior Bowl, being in Mobile for the last 3 days is this. This is the class to, 1, build your run game, and 2, build your run defense. There are so many players here that are going to help your run game, right? Tight ends who can help you in your run game because they can open up stuff because they're a threat as a passer. I mean, not as a passer, but as a receiver, but as a blocker too. There's going to be interior offensive line guys who are going to be able to clear up holes that you're going to be able to get in this draft that we're here at the Senior Bowl. There's running backs galore in this Senior Bowl. So if you want to build your run game, every tool that you need to build your run game, this draft class has it at multiple different rounds. So you can build a run game and the foundation can be built around this class. And I think in a couple of years, you'll be pretty damn good. On the flip side, I think this draft class is also very good at producing guys who are going to be able to defend the run. Right? You have defensive tackles in this class, a lot of run-stopping linebackers, a lot of run-stopping safeties, right? Like a guy like Lathan Ransom was supposed to be here. He's a crash test dummy at the safety position, so you're going to be able to build that. So the theme of the draft this year is stop the run and build the run. Those 2 things will be here. You're going to be able to build a good run defense. You're going to be able to build a good running offense if you just take what the draft gets you in these later rounds, because there's just so much depth at that spot. So that's my thoughts after my 3 days in Mobile. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. I want to thank you guys for watching. Have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.